why should you employ an architect instead of an architectural technologist? I mean, that's a really good question. I was so glad when you came up with this question of why should we have one instead of the other? But
Yeah.
I think part of it comes back to what are you expecting? What is the client expecting to happen? Now, the other couple of weeks ago, we spoke about hiding from the client all the work we do, all the research we do, all the thought we do,
Hmm.
all the design we do. Um, Most of the architects that I've ever worked with do full service. That is, they do
Yeah.
the entire project, but they also tend to do work which is a little unusual. It's often a lot more fun to work on. It's often challenging, and a lot of times it tries to give the client not what they asked for, but what they need. Um, Now, the challenge I've got is that there are some really good architectural technologists that you would think were architects. That is, they've got great design, they've got great detailing, they provide full service, and it's very difficult to see the difference between them and an architect. On the other hand, I also know some architects who really don't do fantastic work and don't do full service, and it's hard to see the difference between them and a architectural technologist. And I think a lot of it's got to do with um, at the beginning you can't see. So when you're starting out, you can't see how the two could merge. An architectural technologist only does this kind of work, and an architect only does that kind of work. Well, what's the difference? I guess if you do commercial work, then it's much easier to see the differences. Like if you
Hmm.
do, large libraries to Papa, that kind of thing, then those buildings, it tends to be a large architectural company. And as the
Yeah.
companies get large, they tend to become architectural companies where design is really important.
Hmm.
Um, and to me, it all depends on the character of the person doing the design. That is, that it's really hard to tell the difference between some architects and some architectural designers, and sometimes
Hmm.
it's real easy to see the difference.
All right. I have another question for you because LBP has can do building category 1, 2, 3. I think ABC or 1, 2, 3, whatever. So, three is for to do the commercial unlimited. So
So it
what's the
doesn't really
difference
three doesn't
between?
really exist.
Yeah. So what's the difference between
Well, I
architects
got a
and architectural technologists at that point?
well, first of all, I got a real issue with LBP one and two design, and that
Yeah.
is that they actually don't test the design; they test the documentation skills of the LBP. They really should be called LBP documentation, not LBP design, because
Hmm.
you can be the worst designer in the world, but document it really well and still get your LBP. Um, the if you're a registered architect, that is the what is it? The Architects Education? No, it's not the Architects Education Registration Board. It's something else. The Registered Architects Board, I think it is. ARB, Architects
And
Registration. Yeah, the
ZARB, I
ARB.
think. Yeah. And
Yeah,
ZARB, yeah.
yeah. Back in the day, back when I was young, it was something different. They changed the law while I was away. So if you get your ARB, if you become a registered architect, you're automatically LBP one
Yes.
and two. LBP three really doesn't exist. Um,
Hmm.
and if you do commercial work, of course, you don't have to have an LBP.
Hmm.
It's the strangest thing. It really only applies to the documentation of buildings, and it's a hangover from the solution to the leaky housing. That is, that no one worried about leaky commercial buildings, so they just kind of disappeared. But anyway, back to it. So I think part of the issue, if you go back to the training of the architect,
Hmm.
the training of the architect focuses a lot on design and not on the documentation. And the expectation is that you will learn a lot about design, then you'll go work somewhere where you will learn about the documentation requirements. Whereas an architectural technologist tends to be the opposite. That is, we worry about documentation, and then we hope that when you go and work in the industry, that you'll have a mentor who will be able to train you to design.
Hmm.
And I just suspect that that's hit and miss. That you go and work for someone who's great at documentation, but they're not great at design. And
Hmm.
so that becomes your training ground. And unless you're very fortunate to work with someone who's highly skilled as a designer, then you end up being great as a documenter, but you don't understand, the subtleties of design.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at some of our best designers from our history, like where I
Hmm.
live, there's a local guy, Paris Magdalenas, James Jack, Neil Fennick. These guys did the AT course first. They were architectural designers before they went to university and became architects. Pete Bosley. There's a whole raft of these people who did that
Hmm.
architectural technology, then design, and it means that their businesses are focused on design, but also from a practical point of view in a lot of cases. They know the
Hmm.
practicalities of what they're trying to draw. They know what works and what doesn't work. And I've got to admit that even until recently, I'd be looking at James's work because I used to work for him, and I'd be going, he is really good at this design. There is so much I could learn from him as an architect, even though I've been practicing for such a long time. I mean, it's a bit like everything else. You never stop learning if you keep that
Yeah.
philosophy. And so I was, it was really interesting to work with him because I would learn quite a lot. There's also an architectural technologist in town who worked in his office many, many years ago.
Hmm.
And so he had the same opportunity that I did, and even more of an opportunity to learn about the good design that he does and to make his buildings, similar to the same high quality design, striking design, really interesting design, but it hasn't quite worked out that way.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
think that there's two parts to this maybe. One is that you've got to be lucky to to work for a good designer, but you've also got to have an open mind and be able to take on board and learn from that person rather than have a fixed mind.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a quite interesting approach of doing the architectural technologists and architects. Because when I was young, there was no school for architectural technologists. There was only one school's architectural trainings, and I had to do, when I went to the architectural office, and then I had to start everything from the detailings and everything. And architects start teaching how to do details, because whatever I teach and whatever I learned is more at the university is more on the concept of how to do a beautiful design and etc. And keep on learning a design studio etc. As such.
Yeah, England was interesting because in England, the company that I worked for had
Mhm.
architect designers,
Mhm.
architect documentation people, architectural technologists, and architects on site. And the English trained architects would never move from one role to the next. So if they were a designer, they'd never document it, which
Mhm.
was strange because they'd do some stuff and you'd look and you go, how the hell are you going to do that? And oh, I don't know. I'm just designing it. I'm not going to document it. And then the documenters never did the design, and they never went on site.
Mhm.
But the company that I worked for had a lot of those English trained people, but also had a lot of Kiwis who would do anything and move from one part to another. So I was working on design of some parts on site for some parts of the same building. But then I'd be working on another project where I was doing design parts, early
Mhm.
design parts. Um, and I didn't see an issue with that because that's the way I was trained.
Yeah.
But I guess in England, you could see a big difference. At the time that I was working there, computers weren't massive. And so I would freehand sketch my details. I'd give them to a draftsman, And literally, I would give them the detail and they would draft it. They would turn my hand sketches into nice ink drawings.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we these days, in particularly where we are in New Zealand, we expect those architectural technologists not to be just draftsmen. We expect
Yeah.
them to be able to start thinking. And I believe that just because you're documenting doesn't mean design has stopped. It's still,
Yeah.
how big, you go to a drawing, you say, put a skirting on there. What size? What shape? How big? What color? That's all
Mm-hmm.
still part of the design. If you put an architrave on the inside of your window, is it, if you've got gibboard, is it a rebated jamb? Is it got an architrave on it? What size is the architrave? How fancy is it? What's the context that you're putting it into? Is it an old building, a new building? These things still affect the detailing, and I still think
Mm-hmm.
design affects the detailing. But
Yeah.
probably like you, I'm trained as an architect and got rose-colored
Yeah.
glasses on.
Yeah. Sometimes. Yeah, it's hard to. Yeah, yeah, but anyway, at the schools, I'm also training my students to be, because the school is only allows up to the level 6 architectural technologies. Yeah, I'm training because since I'm trained as an architect, I also want my students to be an architect at one point of their career. So I
Mm,
train, this is how I keep on telling, this is how architects does it. This is how we do. There are some practice or on, and in the office, this is what happens. These are the good practice, etc. At least they get some inspirations. They get some ideas of how we do it, and also a bit of storytelling, like and also I give them some modern architects and or architects or designs, and hopefully if I have a time, I might be able to bring them to shows all the famous architects. For example, if I go to Singapore, I wish they can follow me. It's like a walking tour, and the other day I was thinking about mapping, because you told me a few weeks ago you will go and visit Singapore and Spain. So I was thinking about, okay, what about making a walking tour map for Jonathan, and from here this architect, from after that you walk to the east, you will get another big high-rise design by another famous architect, which is really interesting when I was there, you know, and yeah,
oh, send
it's really
them to me.
interesting.
But
Yeah,
there's actually we're starting to get off the topic, which is
yeah, yeah, a bit. Yeah,
what is the difference between an architect and
between
architectural
architects and
technologist?
architectural technologists.
But now let's look at it from the public's point of view.
Mm-hmm,
So the public might think that architects are expensive and an
mm-hmm,
architectural technologist is cheaper. They
mm-hmm,
might also think that the architect won't listen to them and the architectural
mm-hmm,
technologist will just do exactly what they say.
mm-hmm.
And so there are different markets, I think, for this. And there are
Yeah,
some architectural technologists who will just do exactly what the client wants. Oh, you want a 3-bedroom house? Boom, there it is. I'll document it.
mm-hmm,
And it's about price.
mm-hmm,
So there is a group of designers who are price driven.
mm-hmm.
Their clients are price driven.
Yeah, yeah,
And the challenge with that, of course, is that you end up, cutting your quality. You
yeah,
can't cut quality much, but you end up working very hard because someone's trying to cut the price of what you're worth down.
mm-hmm,
And some architects, of course, can ask for um, they can ask for almost whatever they want because people want the quality of the work they do.
yeah,
Um, so there was, there's a Ken Crosson's work in Auckland. He does some
mm-hmm,
beautiful work, um, and I'm not sure whether he has to worry about being as price driven as say the local draftsman who's just doing garage extension type things. He's just
mm-hmm,
doing the sort of the work that people doesn't have a whole lot of design in it. And I think that
Hmm.
comes back to a question. Maybe we should talk about how you should plan your business, because if you plan your business badly, then it becomes price driven. And if you plan it well, it can become quality driven. So that is, price is not an issue, but quality is.
Yeah, today's the podcast is quite deep because yeah, unexpected. Yeah, it's really
Yeah. So
interesting.
we should put that one on the back burner, put the business idea on the back burner. I've got a bunch of books
Mhm.
here, like
Yeah.
Niche Down and The E-Myth Revisited,
Hmm.
and we could talk for hours about those books and how they
Hmm.
relate to the setting up of a business of architecture. But back to your question, I don't, yeah, I think there are these subtle differences that some people want someone who'll just do what they want, and it's got to be cheap.
Yeah.
And then there are people who want, like the massive houses in Auckland, very high
Hmm.
quality. They take a lot of work a lot of documentation to get those buildings looking so beautiful. They really do. And they need to have an architect guiding them through the site as well, because otherwise
Yeah.
you won't get the quality that you're looking for. The sort of houses you see on, the grand designs type thing,
Hmm.
most often you never see the architect, but those sort of really high quality buildings, they need someone who does the job of an architect. That is the high quality design, high quality documentation, administering or observation, do we call it now?
Hmm.
Observation on site, um, doing all of that work. And I think that if you get someone who does that work at a high level, there's a guy in Tauranga that I really like his work, and I'm pretty sure he's an architectural technologist. But you
Hmm.
wouldn't know by looking at the photos. You look at it and it's got to be an architect doing this work.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I think that um, well, those are my thoughts anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's quite interesting for it's also our podcast is this time is a little bit more insight to for the future of our student because when after the schools they can be start practicing as an architectural technologist and in a few years they will get their LBP design, etc. So, and probably they might go into the get a degree to become an architect. After that, they will qualify to become registered architect. So, yeah, it is kind of moving from one to another, and we're talking about okay, if you start training as an architectural technologist and the how we engineered or how we prepared the career route is quite interesting because it's not because it's a little bit different from how we have been prepared by the school, but now it is now we are in a role of a tutors or teachers and we are preparing for their best and we need to prepare for the industry to be relevant all the time. Yeah,
I
that's
think this is another. I mean, this what should we advise our students is a completely different topic, and I think it would be a
mhm.
great idea for another podcast.
Yeah.
Maybe next
Yes, we
week
will
we
do
can do
another
it.
podcast. Yeah, we can do it. And what we today's topic is the architectural technologist who and architect. The difference is, well, there's a subtle difference, right? And
It is.
and uh, and when we talk about there is a subtle difference, and and also you mentioned about the cost point of view, the business a bit of business point of view as well, and the training point of view. Yeah, it is quite comprehensive and it's quite enlightening. And thank you for today's podcast. And we'll talk about next week. Bye.
Thanks a lot, Ethan. Bye.
Thank you.